Parker was always drawn to working with the youth and inspiring the youth through his career as well.
That was one of the huge gifts of horror movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's like in his early 40s when House of Wax happens. Now, to be fair, he's been, now in the business for like 17, 18 years. Over that time, there were people who were way more famous than he was. And the example I always like to use is Robert Taylor. So Robert Taylor, super good actor, super handsome. Unless you're a TCM fan, most people haven't heard of Robert Taylor. And nobody's going to a convention and, coming and bursting into tears as they're talking to me because they're Robert Taylor fans. I mean, there's just not that many. And it's because of the horror that my dad's career has stayed alive, because the horror really allowed people to see all of who he was. And I think he played those roles well because he was an outsider because of his love of the arts, even though he grew up wealthy, because he understood what it's like to love something and be different from what society wants you to be. They want you to get a job and do that job till you're 65, get the gold watch, and then figure out with the last little bit of your life what you want to do. My dad didn't see it that way. And so he realized that the reason his career was going to keep going, and this is how he realized, it's a really cute story. So he's doing Richard III on Broadway, and a year after House of Wax came out, and it's still like on marquees in Times Square. He's like, how can anybody possibly be going? I mean, imagine if a movie that came out now was still drawing enough crowds to be, in a first run.
Still going.
Avatar didn't even do that. Like nothing. Titanic didn't do that, right? So he goes into this matinee, he has the day off because he's got a show that night, and he's like, who can possibly be here? It's packed with teenagers, right? And he's like, oh. He gets it, like it's kids who are going, but this is the cute part. So he sits down behind two teenage girls, and they're like panicked, and they're holding on to each other, and they're completely freaked out as the whole movie's going to the end. And by the time the credits rolling, he's been, rolled in the wax, they're like shaking. And he leans forward and he says, did you like it? And these poor girls were
in
like,
that Vincent Price voice that only Vincent Price can do.
So, but then cut to the William Castle movie, that's 5-6 years later. That's a whole new generation. Those teenagers have grown up. Now we got another
generation seems to pick him up at different levels and enjoy his work.
And one of my favorite things is seeing the Vincent Price tattoos. So here's a question. I want you all to go away thinking about this. So when I first saw a Vincent Price tattoo, I'm like, holy cow, like that's a commitment. Like I have tattoos all over, right? None of them are of a person, right? And so I thought, oh my gosh, who would I get if the supreme being, whatever that may be in your mind, comes down and says, I'm going to kill you in 24 hours unless you get a tattoo of someone you will never meet and put it on a public part of your body where everyone can see it. Who would you get? So I asked all my friends, none of whom are horror fans, and they're like, Jesus, Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, and I'm like, and Vincent Price, come on, here you go. But I've seen so many amazing.
That's devotion.
Yes, and they're of all ages. I was just in Denver at a convention, and this young.
And this is not 1940.
No,
so.
This young guy, he's young, and he comes up to me, and he's like, I'm so excited to meet you. I can't believe I'm meeting you. And then he shows me his tattoo, and his wife says to me the cutest thing. She goes, yeah, that was the clincher. I looked at the tattoo and I'm like, yeah, I could marry him. I'm like, how cool is that, right?
That's so cool.
So I want you all to think about what that would be.
I
finally had to figure out what mine was, but it took me years to figure it out. I'm like, who the heck am I who would I put?
That's because it's permanent. That's a commitment, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're starting to run.
I know, but I want to know who everyone
I
want to know who everyone would pick.
Oh, yeah. Any thoughts?
Well, you can come up to my table and tell me.
Okay.
What did he think about working on the Batman?
Oh, well, he wanted that. Everybody was getting cast in that. It was like the Ten Commandments with Cecil B. DeMille. If people were getting cast and he wasn't, it was like, and I mean, come on, it was like all the guest stars were villains. Hello, he's Vincent Price. So yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it was about the kids. Here I am, I'm little. And he wanted me and my friends, because they weren't going to take me to a scary movie, he wanted me and my friends to know who he was. So of course he wanted to do Batman and Daktari.
Something
and
you could watch.
Daniel Boone and, all of those things. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. What a legacy.
So I interrupted you.
No. Victoria was inspired by her parents and is just as creative.
No,
And so
pretend
also,
that I am.
very impressive. So she has written multiple books. I brought one of her, I think the one of the most important books to me anyway is the one on her father, the biography, and she also has written other books on holistic positive thinking and a lot of basis in joy, which is something you received from your father.
Yeah, well, that started because of the Bicentennial. You know, it started because of the Bicentennial. About a month before my first event of that year, the Bicentennial year, I looked in the mirror and I'm like, you're doing everything right. Look, you went through this hard thing, you rebuilt this, you did this, and then I heard this come out of my mouth. I was like, you're miserable. And I was like, I can't keep going like this. And then I went out on the road to celebrate my dad's 100th birthday. And I decided that instead of doing what I'd done on the book tour and talking about what he did, because clearly everybody in the audience knew as much or more than I did, I would talk about how he lived his life.
Right.
And the epiphany that I had, and it changed my life, was that the whole celebrity thing was like the red herring. Because everyone thinks that's the most important part. People will be like, oh my God, you know, when did you know that your dad was different because he was famous? And I was like, I actually always thought he was famous because he was different. You know, like he was just such a bright light. That's why people wanted more of him. That's what made him famous. And I realized that joy, which I see as the pure and simple delight in being alive, was something that he just exuded, and I'd lost it. Because I'd sort of followed after, like, I'm supposed to be creative, I'm supposed to do this. And so I started, it took me 3 years to get there, but I started something that I called the daily practice of joy. Because my parents were also, you can't be that successful and not work hard. They were all workaholics. And I got the workaholic message. I got that, like, you gotta get up and you gotta earn a living and you gotta work. They didn't believe in, you know, free rides and inheritances. They believed, you know, so I got my brother still works, he's 85, you know, we got the workaholic message. And all of a sudden I was like, but joy is the answer, you know? And I read this great piece recently by somebody who said, joy and love and hope are acts of resistance in difficult times. And the bottom line is, let's not talk about the divide in this country. You know, who knows if any of us would be on the same page that the news says we're supposed to be on. It doesn't matter. I come to horror conventions because I love being in a room where everybody's here because they love something. That's rare. Everybody is here because they love this genre. People talk to me because they love my dad, you know? And that joy that people have in horror, in movies, in creativity, in costumes, in makeup, you know, in sharing their stories. It's like, that's what my dad was all about. And to me, you know, I finally realized that if I got up and I practiced joy every day, I would reconnect with that. And what it finally taught me was that all the famous people I've known, and I knew them growing up, I have very famous friends, the only legacy that lasts is love. You know, it really is true. And you know, there's that great quote, I think it's Maya Angelou, where she says, people won't remember what you said, people won't remember what you did, they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's why my dad is still so beloved, because he made them feel something that they still want to feel. And so, you know, now I think, like, how, I mean, you told me when I was 14 I was going to be like traipsing all over the world talking about what 14-year-old wants to be talking about their dad in their 60s. It's embarrassing, you know? But now I feel like, how lucky am I? Because I get to talk about love. I get to talk about love in a room where people aren't arguing with me. You know, they're not arguing because all of you are here because you love this genre. All of you are here because you love film or some part of this, and no one's here sort of making a case for something else, which is very ironic in a horror convention, right?
Right.
But I've started saying this.
That connection, though.
Yeah. I'm actually an interfaith, interspiritual minister, and you know, it's sort of my spiritual practice is really important to me. If I was bleeding out and I was like crawling to a group that would help me, and over here is some traditional church, and over here is a horror convention, wouldn't even be a choice. I'd be going, like, because horror people are like the kindest, nicest, most loving, welcoming. I mean, how many people walk into a convention saying, I don't understand why you guys like this scary stuff, and you're like, come on in, you know? I mean, that doesn't happen in real life. If I'm a Dodgers fan and I walk in, you know, most people are like, how can you be, I mean, everything's gotten so bitter and divided.
Right.
But anything that's love-based can bring us together, and that's what my dad did, you know. And it wasn't any prettier. He was gray-listed during the McCarthy era. You know, he was working for the Kennedy White House when Kennedy was shot, and he gave the White House Art Committee a drawing, and it's a drawing of a study of clouds, and apparently it was Kennedy's favorite thing, President Kennedy's favorite thing in this collection that was given. And so he hung it at the end of his bed because he felt like every morning he would wake up with hope if he looked at this drawing of clouds. And I remember my dad saying, you know, when he was shot, he just pictured him waking up that morning to that hope, and then that was that, you know. But again, you know, it's like my dad lived through tough stuff and tough times, you know, and but we're all here because he brought us joy, and we're all here because we love the same thing, and so that's why I think it's like these kinds of conventions are so important.
Well,
you know?
speaking of how someone makes you feel, I think that's a perfect note to end on as far as the legacy of your father, and I think we're all very grateful for that.
Yeah, me too.
Before we finish up any further, does anyone have questions that I want to? No.
If you can't think of one, just come to my table. I'll be here.
Victoria has a table here right up front when you walk in, and she can talk further if you need information about her books.
Allie will be happy to answer
Allie
questions
will be there,
too.
and Allie's the sweetest thing ever.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and they can find you. You have a
Yes, so there's vincentprice.com, victoriaprice.com, and yeah, I'm on reluctantly social media. I've sort of switched over to Blue Sky where I post a picture a day because that's one of my daily practices of joy. But I am on, you know, the traditional social medias. My handle is I'm Victoria Price, and my dad's is Master of Menace.
yes.
So.
Lovely. Well, we just want to thank Victoria so much, and Allie, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming. It's really, you know, it's always a joy for me to get to share my dad with people. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.